Hello, fellow book nerds. I'm here to tell you a little bit about the characters in my 24th novel, The Oppenheimer Alternative. But character number one is always the author, so let me introduce myself. My name is Robert J. Sawyer. I'm a Hugo and Nebula award-winning science fiction writer living in Toronto, Canada. I'm past president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, and The Oppenheimer Alternative is my 24th novel. I've been a novelist now for 30 years. As you might guess from the title, the main character is J. Robert Oppenheimer. And in fact, all of the characters in this novel are real and famous historical people, every single one of them. Let's start with J. Robert Oppenheimer. Now, you may know, because it was much in the news this past summer, that he's the father of the atomic bomb 75 years ago. In the summer of 1945, he, as scientific director of the Manhattan Project, created the world's first atomic bomb along with his team, and ultimately was responsible for the use of those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where well over 150,000 people lost their lives. But did you know that J. Robert Oppenheimer was a terrible father? He put or at least offered his own daughter up for adoption because he said, "I cannot love her." He brought around the downfall of himself and his best friend, Håkon Chevalier, by an act of, as Hoke would say, unfathomable folly. Håkon Chevalier, by the way, is a character in the book too. Did you know that besides being J. Robert Oppenheimer's best friend, he was also the leader of the American delegation to the Nuremberg trials as translator, and he and his team invented the notion of simultaneous translation that we take for granted today? Other characters in the book are just as famous and just as storied. Everybody will tell you that Oppie's boss was the General Leslie R. Groves. And if they want to cite something from Groves's CV, they'll say, oh, he's the man who built the Pentagon. Well, that's true. But he's also the man who built the internment camps for Japanese American citizens during World War II. Oppie's nemesis, if he had one, was another physicist, one of the Hungarian Martian contingent, as they called themselves, because their language was so unrelated to even other European tongues that it came across as Martian to a lot of people. So Edward Teller, who went on to be the father of the much more powerful hydrogen bomb, was Oppie's bête noire. And when Oppie came up against a security clearance hearing, it was Edward Teller, amongst all the physicists who stood up for Oppie, it was Teller who broke ranks and testified against Oppie. How did Teller atone for his sin? Well, I'm a novelist and I'm writing an alternate history novel where I get to fill in the blanks about what we don't know about the actual historical record. One of the things we don't know is that J. Robert Oppenheimer's bête noire, as I say, Edward Teller, he really did go to see the dying physicist Enrico Fermi, known as the Pope of Physics, and said, as he said quite rightly, it makes way more sense to confess your sins to the dying than it does to the living, because A, they're going to meet the maker before you are, and B, they'll take their secrets to their grave. So I get to tell you in my novel, my fictitious version, what Edward Teller's confession to the dying Enrico Fermi was. Other characters in this book are Richard Feynman, who many of you will know from Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, and other nonfiction collections of his very witty remarks and lifestyle. But did you know that he used the principles of game theory and practical or theoretical physics to pick up girls in bars? He was quite a ladies' man, as was Oppie himself. Other characters in here include Albert Einstein, Kurt Gödel, who was the only man that Einstein thought was more intelligent than he was. In fact, Einstein used to say, when he was at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, where a very large part of my novel takes place, where Oppenheimer had become the director, he used to say, I only go to my office at Princeton. I know all my German accents sound like Dracula. I only go to my office at Princeton for the pleasure of walking home with Kurt Gödel. Also in here is Werner von Braun, Wernher von Braun is known, of course, as the father of the V2 rocket, and also the man responsible for putting the first human beings on the moon. He was the head of the V2 project. So we've got a cast of characters. As a writer, it was a challenge for me. I had to get to know them as well as their families did, as well as their living descendants, or all these people are dead now, but many of them not for very long, and write an account of their lives that rang true, and then fictionalize and extend that in my alternate history to tell you things nobody had ever told you before about these characters and their interactions. I'm hearing from those who really knew these guys that I nailed it, which is very gratifying to hear. I worked very hard to make that possible. I'm hoping you'll think so too once you give the Oppenheimer alternative by me, Robert J. Sawyer, a try. You can find sample chapters of it on my website, sfwriter.com. S is in science, F is in fiction, writer.com. And again, I'm Robert J. Sawyer. The new book, my 24th, The Oppenheimer Alternative. Believe me, it's a blast.